My hands trembled as they hovered over the keys. At 72, Arthur Reed, the man who once made concert halls weep with his Chopin, now struggled to find a middle C without a jolt of pain shooting through his swollen knuckles. The grand pianoa. Steinway Model B, I'd nicknamed Elara after the moon of Jupiter, was the only thing of true value I owned. It wasn't just an instrument. It was the keeper of my soul, the last duet partner of my late wife. Clara. The call came in on a Tuesday afternoon. The caller ID glowed with my daughter's name, Chloe. "Hi, Dad." Her voice was a familiar melody, sweet and light, designed to disarm. "Just checking in. How are the hands today?" "Stiff," I said, flexing my fingers, the joints protesting like rusty hinges. But I was just about to practice. Debussy, Clair de Lune, your mother's favorite. "That's great." "Dad," she said, but her tone was distant, like she was already reading from a different script. "Listen, Jeremy and I were thinking, with your arthritis getting worse, and the upkeep on that beast." She paused, and I could hear the careful construction of her next sentence. "It's such a massive thing in that small living room. Must be a hazard. We found this wonderful modern assisted living facility over in Ridgewood. Tiny apartments, but so efficient. And they have a community keyboard. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." My blood ran cold. The community keyboard. She might as well have suggested trading a Stradivarius for a child's plastic ukulele. "Elara is not a hazard. Chloe," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "She's my life." "I know, Gad, I know," she soothed, that sugary tone now feeling like syrup trapping a fly. "But we have to be practical. Think of the equity tied up in that piano. A Steinway Model B." Jeremy looked it up. "It's worth over 100,000. That could pay for your care for years. We could free up so much space in your house, make it safer for you." Free up space. The words echoed in the hollow space her empathy used to occupy. "I'm not selling Elara, Chloe. We've discussed this." "We're not selling her," she said, and I could picture the patient smile on her face, the one she used when explaining simple things to simple people. "We're reinvesting. In your future, our future. Jeremy's firm is expanding into Boulder, and this capital would be a huge help for a down payment on a real home there. One with a guest suite you could eventually—" She kept talking, weaving a web of financial planning and concern, but I stopped listening. There was a click on the line, the sound of another call, waiting. "Oh, hang on, Dad. That's the appraiser now for the piano. Love you. We'll talk soon." She didn't hang up, or she thought she did. There was a muffled rustle, then her voice, clear and sharp, stripped of all its fake sweetness. "He's being stubborn, Jeremy. Absolutely refuses to see reason. No, I didn't tell him you already have a buyer, because he'd have a coronary. Look, we just need to get him into Ridgewood first. Once he's there and disoriented, we move the piano. He'll adjust. It's just an object." Jeremy's reply was a low murmur I couldn't decipher. Liability? Chloe laughed, a sound that used to fill this very room when I taught her first scales. Now it was cold, transactional. "He's been a liability since Mom died. An emotional one. This will be clean. We get the cash for the piano and the Boulder house, and he gets 3 square meals a day and a nurse to call. Everyone wins." The phone slid from my hand. It didn't clatter on the hardwood floor Clara and I had polished by hand. It landed soundlessly on the thick Persian rug she'd chosen, because it absorbed the sadness of the minor keys. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I looked at Elara. The rich, dark wood gleamed in the afternoon light. I saw the faint scratch on the side from when a 6-year-old Chloe rode her tricycle too close. I saw the ghost of Clara's reflection in the polished lid as she turned the pages for me. This wasn't about a piano. This was about erasing me, packaging my history, my love, my grief into a neat little box labeled liability and selling it to the highest bidder. They didn't just want to put me in a home. They wanted to sell the very notes of my life. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes not from absence of feeling, but from a decision so absolute it silences everything else. I stood up, my arthritic joints complaining, and walked to my study. I didn't go to the drawer with the receipts and warranties. I went to the locked fireproof box where I kept the only documents that mattered. The certificate of ownership for the Steinway, its full provenance, and the appraisal from Sotheby's I'd secretly obtained after Clara died. It was worth $120,000, and it was mine. Solely mine. Chloe thought she was negotiating the sale of a piece of furniture. She was wrong. I was about to conduct my final, greatest performance. And it wouldn't be Debussy. It would be a reckoning. The silence after her betrayal wasn't empty. It was full. It hummed with the resonance of every note ever played in this room, every laugh shared, every tear shed. It was a silence that demanded action. I didn't call Todd Fisher, the real estate attorney. I called a different number, one printed on a crisp, elegant business card I'd been given years ago at a charity auction. Isabel Laurent, Rare Instruments and Estates. Discretion assured. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, calm, measured, and devoid of false sentiment. Mr. Reed, I was sorry to hear about Clara. She had an impeccable ear. Thank you, Isabel, I said, my voice steady, surprising myself. I have a performance for you, a solo act, and it requires an audience of one very serious buyer. The Steinway? There was a hint of professional excitement, quickly reined in. The market is selective, but for an instrument of that pedigree, and with its provenance, we can be selective in return. May I ask what inspires the timing? My daughter believes it's time to trade my symphony for elevator music, I said, the words tasting like ash. I've decided to choose the venue for my final bow. There was a pause on the line, a beat of understanding. I see. Leave it to me, Arthur. I will find someone who will appreciate Alara, not just for her value, but for her voice. The next 2 days were a study in surreal normalcy. Chloe called again, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. Just confirming the appraiser for tomorrow, Dad? His name is Mark. He'll be there at 10. Be nice, okay? This is for the best. I'll be the picture of hospitality, I said, my tone flat. I was. When the young man arrived, clipboard in hand, I let him in. I watched him run his fingers over the keys, not with reverence, but with clinical assessment. He tapped the soundboard, made notes on his tablet, and took photos from every angle. He saw asset. He did not see Alara. It's in remarkable condition for its age, he remarked, as if speaking about a vintage car. I corrected him softly. She is in remarkable condition. He gave me a puzzled smile and left. The report would go to Jeremy. The offer would be lowball, a starting point for their negotiation against my will. But Isabel Laurent worked faster. She sent a single client. His name was Mr. Chun, a soft-spoken man in his 50s. He didn't bring a clipboard. He brought sheet music. He sat at the bench, closed his eyes for a moment, and then began to play. Not a full piece, but a cascade of arpeggios, a chord progression, testing the tone, the touch, the soul of the instrument. The room filled with a sound so rich and full, it brought tears to my eyes. He understood. When he finished, he simply nodded. She has been loved, he said. I can hear it. Isabel had already negotiated the terms. Full asking price, $120,000, a wire transfer upon removal. There was only one condition I insisted upon, a clause Isabel called unorthodox, but not unprecedented. Mr. Chun agreed without hesitation. The transaction was set for Friday morning. The same day Chloe and Jeremy, would return from their scouting trip to Boulder. Thursday night, I spent my final hours with Alara. I didn't play Debussy. I played the rough, joyful pieces Clara used to play when Chloe was a child. Heart and soul, chopsticks, the simple, happy music of a family that hadn't yet fractured. The sound echoed in the empty spaces of the house, a ghostly requiem. Early Friday, a team of specialist movers arrived, silent and efficient under Mr. Chun's watchful eye. They patted Alara with a tenderness I was grateful for, dismantling her graceful legs, swaddling her majestic body in blankets, and carrying her out to a waiting climate-controlled van. It was a funeral procession. I stood in the doorway, my heart a drumbeat of grief and grim satisfaction. The van pulled away. The wire transfer hit my new account, a number Chloe knew nothing about. The balance glowed on my phone screen. Not just money. Emancipation. Then I got to work. I moved not my possessions, but theirs. Over the years, Chloe and Jeremy had used my home as overflow storage. Boxes of Jeremy's old business textbooks, Chloe's childhood dolls, her college thesis, the expensive wedding dress she'd worn for a day and never looked at again. I had it all boxed, labeled, and moved to a storage unit I'd rented in their names. I taped the key to the unit's lock inside a small envelope. The final touch was the letter. I didn't tape it to the door. I placed it on the bare floorboards, in the exact center of the room where Alara had stood for 30 years. A single sheet of paper in a vast, empty space. Chloe, Jeremy, I heard your concerto of concern. The movement where I am a liability. The movement where you sell my history to finance your future. Alara has found a new home with someone who values her music more than her market price. The proceeds are mine. Your things are at City Storage on 5th, Unit 417. You have 30 days. You wanted to free up space. Consider it done. Arthur. I didn't sign it, love. Love had been used as a weapon for the last time. I took one last look at the empty room. The sunlight streamed in, falling on a floor unmarked by the weight of a piano for the first time in decades. It looked larger, but also barren. A stage without its performer. Then I walked out, locking the door behind me. I didn't look back. The performance was over. The applause, I knew, would not be coming from my daughter. It would be the silent, steady sound of my own heartbeat, finally playing in rhythm for the first time in years. The first night in the small, rented apartment was not spent in silence. I had brought only a suitcase of clothes, Clara's jewelry box, our wedding album, and the old metronome that used to sit atop Alara. Its steady, mechanical tick-tock-tick was a poor substitute for the piano's resonance, but it was a heartbeat. It was rhythm. And for now, that was enough. I had set up my phone to watch the live feed from the small, discreet camera I'd mounted on a bookshelf facing the living room. It showed a void, a space defined by its absence. The pale rectangle on the floorboards. Where Alara had stood was a ghost haunting the empty room. They arrived in the late afternoon. The front door swung open, and Chloe entered first, laughing at something Jeremy said, a shopping bag from a Boulder boutique dangling from her wrist. Jeremy followed, rolling their suitcases, already talking about the square footage of a property they'd seen. They made it 3 steps inside before they stopped. The laughter died mid-breath. The sound that came out of Chloe wasn't a word. It was a short, sharp gasp, like the air had been punched from her lungs. Her hand flew to her mouth, the shopping bag dropping to the floor. What the? Jeremy's voice cut through the stunned silence. He stepped around her, his eyes scanning the room, not comprehending. What is this? Where is it? The piano, Chloe whispered, the word a fragile thing. Dad? Her head swiveled, her eyes frantic, searching the corners of the room, as if I might be hiding there. Then her gaze fell to the floor, to the single piece of paper centered in the vast emptiness. She moved toward it slowly, as if walking through water, and bent to pick it up. I watched on the small screen as her eyes darted across the lines of my note. Her face, pixelated but clear in its horror, drained of all color. Her hand began to shake so violently the paper rattled. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no. What does it say?" Jeremy snapped, striding over and snatching the letter from her. His eyes scanned it, his jaw tightening with each word. "He sold it? He can't do that. That's our money." He heard. "Use," Chloe said, her voice hollow, distant. She was staring at the empty space where her childhood, her lessons, her mother's memory once lived. "He heard everything. So what?" Jeremy's voice rose, sharp with panic and greed. "He's an old man. He's confused. We'll contest it. We'll say he wasn't of sound mind. That piano was half yours. Was it?" Chloe turned. To him, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of the daughter I knew, a glimmer of shame beneath the shock. "His name is on the certificate, Jeremy. Only his," Mom insisted. She said it was his soul, not a piece of furniture. Her use of Clara's words she had clearly forgotten until this moment, sent an unexpected pang through me. Jeremy wasn't listening. He was already on his phone, pacing the empty room. "Yeah, hi. Is this Eldridge Law? I need to speak. To someone about an elderly parent." "Yes, financial exploitation." "No, he exploited us?" I almost smiled. The sheer audacity of it. The rewriting of history in real time. Chloe sank to her knees on the bare floor, right in the ghostly outline of the piano. She wrapped her arms around herself and began to cry. Not the performative sniffling from her voicemails, but deep, ragged sobs that shook her entire body. She was finally mourning. Not for me, not for our relationship, but for the tangible symbol of a past she had tried to monetize and had now. Lost forever. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Then again and again, calls from Chloe, from Jeremy, from an unknown number, likely the lawyer. I let them ring. The metronome continued its steady, unwavering beat, that tick-dash, tock-dash, tick. An hour later, a new notification appeared on my screen. A voicemail. I waited until the sky outside my apartment window turned a deep indigo. Then I pressed play. "Dad?" Chloe's voice was raw, stripped bare of its usual sugar-coating. "Dad, please. I'm at the storage unit. I got your key. I'm so sorry. What we said, it was terrible. We were stressed. We didn't mean it. Jeremy, he gets ideas sometimes. Please, we need to talk. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm so scared." The message ended. There it was. Not an apology for the betrayal, but a fear of the consequences. An attempt to blame Jeremy. It was a beginning, but it was not enough. I deleted the voicemail. I poured a small glass of whiskey, the good stuff Clara and I saved for celebrations, and I raised it to the metronome. "To silence, old girl," I murmured, "and to the music that only I get to choose to play from now on." The next move was theirs. But the board, finally, was mine. The silence in my apartment was no longer a void. It was a blank sheet of music. For days, the only sounds were the metronome's steadfast tick, the whisper of the kettle, and the faint hum of a city living its life beyond my window. My phone eventually went quiet. The flurry of calls and messages ceased, replaced by a silence from their end that was louder than any plea. I didn't spend my days staring at the camera feed. The image of that empty room, of Chloe on her knees, was seared into my memory. It was a necessary pain, a cauterization. Instead, I began to compose a new routine. My first venture out was to a music store downtown. A dusty, narrow shop crammed with instruments and scores, smelling of rosin and old paper. A young clerk with a lip ring looked up from restringing. "A guitar. Help you, sir?" "I need a keyboard," I said, my voice feeling rusty from disuse. "Electronic, with a headphone jack." He showed me a few models. I chose a simple, lightweight one. It wasn't a Lara. It would never be. But its keys were weighted, and when I plugged in the headphones and pressed a chord, the sound was clean and precise in my ears. A private music. A music just for me, no longer for an audience that didn't appreciate it. I carried it home like a secret. The following morning, I went back to the cafe, Brews and Views. Sarah, the barista with the purple hair, gave me a genuine smile. "You're back. Ethiopian roast to raise Lazarus?" "Please." I took my seat by the window. The normalcy was a balm. I watched the world go by, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost observing the living. I was just a man in a cafe, drinking coffee. My phone buzzed. Not a call, but an email. The sender made my breath catch. Isabel Laurent. The subject line. A note from the new patron. With slightly trembling fingers. I opened it. "Mr. Reed, I hope this finds you well. My client, Mr. Chun, has asked me to pass along a message. He has had the piano meticulously tuned and placed in a room with northern light, as you suggested. He says, and I quote, 'She sounds like she is home.' He has also enclosed something for you. A digital recording. He thought you might appreciate it. Warmly, Isabel." Below was a link. I fumbled for my headphones, plugged them into my phone, and clicked it. The sound that filled my ears was so familiar, it was a physical ache. It was a Lara. Mr. Chun was playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Clara's piece. But he wasn't just playing the notes. He was playing the silence between them, the emotion, the history. He was playing her with love, tears I didn't know. I had left streaming down my face, there in the sunny cafe. They weren't tears of loss anymore. They were tears of gratitude. Elara was not just an asset in a ledger. She was alive. She was cherished. I had not sold her. I had saved her. The music ended. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of peace. I looked up, wiping my eyes, to find Sarah placing a fresh napkin beside my cup. Her eyes were kind, asking no questions. "Sounds like a good song," she said softly. "The best," I managed to reply. That afternoon, the letter arrived, not an email. A real physical letter, the paper thick and expensive. Chloe's handwriting, usually a rushed scrawl, was careful, deliberate. "Dad, I'm writing. This from the storage unit. It's cold, and it smells of dust. I found my wedding dress. I found my old thesis. I found the box of letters you and Mom wrote to each other when you were touring. I'd forgotten about those. Jeremy is furious. He's talking lawyers, competency hearings. I told him to stop. I've moved into a hotel for now. I keep thinking about that empty space in the living room. It's all I can see when I close my eyes. It's not the piano I miss. It's what it meant. It was the one constant thing. The heart of the house. And I tried to sell its heartbeat. I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if I deserve for you to. I just needed to say it. I was wrong. Chloe, I read it twice. Then a third time. There was no request for money. No demand for reconciliation. Just a statement. I was wrong, God. It was a single clean note in the dissonant chord they had created. I didn't reply. Not yet. Some notes need to hang in the air, need to be felt in their entirety before the next one is played. But that night, for the first time, I didn't dream of an empty room. I dreamed of a single shining string on a grand piano, vibrating with a pure, clear tone, waiting to see what note would be played next. Weeks bled into a month, marked not by Chloe's calls or Jeremy's threats, but by the quiet rhythm of my new life. The digital keyboard became my confidant. In the solitude of my apartment, with headphones on, I could play for hours. The pain in my hands was a constant companion, but I learned to work with it, to play slower, more deliberate pieces. I wasn't practicing for a performance anymore. I was playing for the sheer, selfish joy of it. I received a formal letter from a law firm, Eldridge and Sons. It was full of legal jargon, questioning my mental competency and suggesting a mediation regarding the improper dissipation of a shared family asset. I didn't shred it. I took it to Marcus, my financial advisor. He read it with a frown, then looked up over his silver-rimmed glasses. "This is nonsense, Arthur. The piano is solely in your name." Your daughter admitted as much in her letter. "This is bullying, hoping you'll cave to avoid a fight." "I'm not caving," I said, my voice calm. "What should I do?" "Nothing," Marcus said, a slight smile on his lips. "Absolutely nothing. Let them spend their money on legal fees. Without her cooperation, Jeremy has no standing." Silence, in this case, is not just golden. It's a solid steel wall. I liked that. A steel wall. I left his office feeling lighter. The next day, I volunteered at the community rec center. They had an old, out-of-tune upright piano in the common room, mostly used for children's sing-alongs. I mentioned to the activities director, a cheerful woman named Marjorie, that I could probably tune it. She looked at me, surprised. "You're full of surprises, Arthur. We'd be so grateful." So, I borrowed a tuning kit from the dusty music shop. It took me 3 afternoons. My aching hands protested, but the process was meditative. Listening, adjusting, bringing each string back to its true pitch. When I finished, I played a simple scale. The sound was tinny and thin compared to Ilara, but it was true. It was honest. A small round of applause made me jump. A handful of residents had gathered, including Arthur, the Vietnam vet I played chess with. "Didn't know you had that in you, Reed?" he grunted, but he was smiling. Later, as I was packing the tools, Marjorie approached me. "Arthur, some of the residents were wondering, would you consider giving a little talk? Not a concert. Just talk about music? Maybe play a little?" The old me would have declined. The performer who only played on a perfect instrument for a paying audience. But the new me, the man with the digital keyboard and the tuned upright, nodded. "I think I'd like that." The event was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. I didn't prepare a speech. I simply sat at the newly tuned piano and looked at the 20 or so faces, mostly older, some in wheelchairs, all waiting. "My wife, Clara," I began, my voice a little rough. "She used to say that most people listen to the notes, but you should really listen to the spaces between the notes. That's where the feeling is, the anticipation, the memory." I played a few bars of Claire de Lune, slowly, simply. "That space between the notes," I said, pausing between chords. "That's where you decide what comes next. A sad note? A hopeful one? The music doesn't decide. You do." I talked about my hands, about the arthritis, about how I had to relearn everything. I wasn't a maestro to them. I was just Arthur, the new guy who fixed the piano. And for the first time in decades, I felt like just Arthur. After playing a few more simple pieces, I took questions. They were kind, simple. "What was your favorite piece to play? Did you ever meet anyone famous?" Then, a woman in the front row, her hands knotted with age, asked, "Was it hard to let your piano go?" The room went quiet. They'd heard rumors, of course. I looked at her, then at the others. "Yes," I said, truthfully. "It was like losing a limb. Or a friend. But sometimes a limb gets diseased. And to save the rest of you, you have to let it go." I flexed my stiff fingers. I'm learning to play with what I have left. And I'm finding the music can still be beautiful. Just different. There was a soft murmur of understanding. They, of all people, knew about learning to live with what you have left. Afterwards, as people shuffled out, Marjorie handed me a cup of terrible rec center coffee. Thank you, Arthur. That was real. I was packing my sheet music when I felt a presence behind me. I turned. It was Chloe. She stood near the door, her coat buttoned to her throat, her face pale. She'd been there the whole time. How long had she been listening? Our eyes met across the room. There was no anger on her face, no pleading, just a profound, exhausted sadness. She didn't approach. She didn't smile. She simply gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a request. It was an acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked away. I stood there for a long time, the echo of my own words hanging in the air. That's where you decide what comes next. The space between the notes had never felt so vast or so full of possibility. Winter arrived, draping the city in a crisp, white silence. My life had settled into a new, gentle cadence. Mornings were for the cafe, afternoons for the rec center, and evenings for my keyboard and the private world of sound inside my headphones. The legal letters had stopped. The silence from Chloe's direction had become a fact of life, not a wound. I thought of her often, of the haunted look in her eyes in the rec center doorway. But the sharp edge of the betrayal had dulled, replaced by a dull, persistent ache of what was lost. I was building a life around that ache, making a home for it so it wouldn't consume me. One afternoon, as I was helping Marjorie sort donated books for the rec center's library, she handed me a small, familiar-looking picture book. This one's seen better days, but the kids love it. It was Stone Soup, the same edition I'd read to Chloe 1,000 times. The spine was reinforced with yellowing tape, the pages soft with wear. My throat tightened. I opened the cover. There, in the top corner, in Clara's looping cursive, was written, Chloe's book. Do not lose. I'll take this one, I said. My voice husky. Marjorie smiled, understanding more than she let on. It's yours. That night, I placed the book on my small kitchen table. I didn't open it. I just let it sit there, a silent testament to a past that felt both a million miles away and right in front of me. The knock on my door a few days later was soft, tentative, not Mrs. Chun's firm rap. I opened it to find Chloe standing there. She wasn't dressed for drama. She wore a simple wool coat, her hair was pulled back, and she held a small, tinfoil-covered dish in her hands. No words passed between us for a long moment. The silence was different now. Not a weapon, not a wall, but a wide, empty plain we were, both staring across. I made lemon squares, she finally said, her voice quiet, stripped of all its former performance. The powdered sugar is uneven, just like Mom's. She held out the dish. I didn't take it immediately. I looked at her hands. They were bare, red from the cold. She wasn't wearing the expensive rings Jeremy had bought her. I found her recipe box. She added when I still didn't speak. I'm not here to prove anything, or ask for anything. I wanted to bring her back, even if it's just for a moment. I stepped back and held the door open wider. A silent invitation. She entered, her eyes taking in the modest apartment, the digital keyboard on its stand, the metronome on the shelf, the picture book on the table. Her gaze lingered on the book, and a flicker of pain crossed her face. She set the dish on the counter and unwrapped it. The lemon squares looked exactly as Clara's always had, slightly misshapen, with a haphazard dusting of sugar. I moved out, she said, not looking at me. The apartment, I mean. Jeremy and I We're done. It turns out his plans required my father's money more than they required me. The words weren't there, just factual. A lesson learned. I nodded slowly. I cut 2 small squares and placed them on plates. We sat at the small table, the book between us. We ate in silence. The taste was a time machine. Tart, sweet, imperfect. It tasted like home. Not the house I sold, but the feeling of home Clara had created, unseen. Someone, she said after a while. A therapist, I told her. I told her I'd forgotten how to receive kindness unless I could control it. She finally looked at me, her eyes glistening. I think I punished you for being steady, because I never learned how to be. The admission hung in the air, raw and real. It wasn't an excuse. It was an explanation. And it was more than I had ever expected to hear. I didn't offer absolution. I didn't tell her it was okay, because it wasn't. But I offered her the only thing I had left that was real. Your mother, I said, my voice low. She carried everything without ever asking for help. And I stayed quiet, so no one would have to feel bad. We thought we were protecting you. I think we just taught you the wrong kind of strength. Chloe's composure broke then. She cried, not the ragged sobs of loss from the empty living room, but quiet tears of recognition, of seeing the chain of cause and effect that had led us to this quiet kitchen. We didn't hug. We didn't resolve years of pain in an afternoon. But we sat there, 2 people sharing a plate of lemon squares, with the ghost of a wife and mother sitting silently between us. When she left, she didn't ask to come back. She didn't ask for money or forgiveness, Dot. She just said, the therapist says reconciliation is a slow movement, not a crescendo. I stood at the door, watching her walk down the hallway. Adagio, I said softly, Dot. She turned, a question on her face. It means slowly, I explained. In music. A faint, genuine smile touched her lips for the first time. Adagio, then. She left. I closed the door and leaned against it, the taste of lemon and sugar and a fragile, terrifying hope lingering on my tongue. The music wasn't over. It had simply changed key. And for the first time, I was curious to hear what came next. Spring returned to the city, not with a fanfare, but with a gentle thaw. The patches of dirty snow receded, revealing stubborn blades of grass beneath. My life, once defined by a grand piano and its echoing absence, had found a quieter, deeper rhythm. Chloe's visits became part of that rhythm. Not frequent and never predictable. Sometimes she would appear on a Saturday morning with 2 coffees from Brews and Views, and we would sit on the bench by the community garden, watching the first brave crocuses push through the cold earth. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about her therapy. We talked about the book she was reading. We talked about the mundane, glorious details of an ordinary life being rebuilt. She never mentioned Jeremy again. I learned from a passing comment from Sarah at the cafe that he had indeed left the city, his reputation in tatters after a failed venture. The news brought me no pleasure. He was simply a wrong note that had faded from the piece. One such Saturday, Chloe was quieter than usual. She sipped her coffee, her gaze fixed on a robin pulling a worm from the soil. I put an offer on a place, she said finally, her voice calm. A small townhouse. It needs work. The bathroom is a nightmare of pink tile. I nodded, waiting. It has a sunroom, she continued, south-facing. The light? It reminded me of the light in the living room. In the old house, in the morning, she risked a glance at me. It would be a good room for a keyboard. If someone ever wanted to play, the offer hung in the air between us. Not an invitation to live with her, not a request for money. For a down payment, an offering, a space for music, should I ever choose to fill it. Pink tile is a commitment, I said, a dry note in my voice. She laughed, a real unforced sound that was still a rare and precious thing. I know. I'm thinking of it as a character builder. We sat in a comfortable silence after that. The unspoken understanding was enough. The door was open. The tempo was adagio. Later that week, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a framed photograph. It was a picture of Alara. She stood in a beautiful, airy room filled with plants and sunlight, exactly as I described to Mr. Chun. On the piano's music rest was a sheet of Clara's favorite Chopin. And sitting on the bench, not playing, but with his hand resting gently on the lid, was Mr. Chun. He was smiling softly. There was no note. None was needed. The image said everything. She was loved. She was home. I placed the photograph on my shelf, right beside the metronome. It didn't feel like a painful reminder. It felt like a blessing. The final piece of the movement came on a bright, clear afternoon. I was at the rec center, giving my now regular music appreciation talk to a handful of residents. I was telling them about Clara's theory of the space between the notes when I saw her. Chloe was standing at the back of the room, but she wasn't alone. Beside her, holding her hand tightly, was a little girl of about 4 or 5. She had a head of wild, dark curls and serious, intelligent eyes that were taking in the entire room. Chloe leaned down and whispered something to her, and the girl nodded, her eyes landing on me. I finished my talk, my heart beating a strange, hopeful rhythm against my ribs. After the small crowd dissipated, Chloe approached the little girl, hiding slightly behind her legs. "Dad," Chloe said, her voice a mix of nerves and pride. "This is Marigold, my daughter." The world narrowed to that single point. The little girl peeked out from behind her mother's coat. Marigold, a name from the earth. A name of bright, persistent color. "Hi, Marigold," I said, lowering myself slowly to a crouch, my knees protesting. "I'm Arthur." She studied me for a long, solemn moment. Then she pointed a small finger at the digital keyboard on the stand beside me. "Do you know how to play that?" "A little." "Can you play something?" she asked, her voice clear and bright. "Mom says you make good music." I looked at Chloe. Her eyes were shimmering with tears, but she was smiling. She gave me a slight, encouraging nod. I sat on the bench and switched the keyboard on. I didn't play Chopin or Debussy. I played the first thing that came to my mind. Heart and soul. The simple, cheery chords filled the room. Marigold's serious expression broke into a wide, delighted grin. She began to sway and to bounce on her toes. Without a word, Chloe sat on the bench beside me on the other side. She looked at the keys, then at me, a question in her eyes. It had been decades since she'd played. I nodded. Tentatively, she placed her hands on the keys. She fumbled for the first few notes of the bass line, then found it. Our eyes met. Her playing was clumsy, rusty, but it was there. We were playing together. A simple, silly duet for a little girl who was dancing in a sunbeam. The music was tinny. On the digital speaker, it was imperfect. It was filled with wrong notes and hesitant rhythms. But in the spaces between those notes and the anticipation, the memory, the shared, breathless hope was the most beautiful sound I had heard in a very, very long time. It wasn't an ending. It was a resolution. A final peaceful chord that promised the music was far from over. Life, I had learned, did not offer perfect, symmetrical endings. It offered continuations, variations on a theme. The melody of my days was no longer a solo performance, but a quiet, harmonious trio. Marigold became the sun around which our new world orbited. Her visits were the highlight of my week. She would burst into my apartment, a whirlwind of curls and questions, her small backpack filled with art supplies, mostly crayons and crumpled paper, and a fierce determination, too. Help Grandpa with his garden. The small plot near the benches was now our garden. We planted marigolds, of course, and zinnias, and a single, stubborn tomato plant that she checked on with the gravity of a research scientist. I showed her how to pat the soil gently around. The seeds, how to water without drowning the fragile roots. You have to be patient. I told her one afternoon as she stared at the dirt, willing a flower to appear. But when? She sighed, her small shoulders slumping with the immense burden of waiting. The best things, I said, quoting Clara without even thinking, always take their own time. She considered this, then nodded, satisfied with this piece of ancient wisdom. She had her mother's intensity, but thankfully, not her impatience. Chloe watched us from the bench, a quiet contentment on her face that I hadn't seen since she was a girl. The sharp edges of ambition and anxiety had softened. She was learning the rhythm of a slower, simpler life. She was learning to listen to the spaces between the notes. One evening, she stayed after putting Marigold to sleep on my sofa, wrapped in an old Afghan. I got the townhouse, she said, her voice quiet. The pink tile and all. Congratulations. I said, meaning it. The sunroom, she started, then hesitated. I was thinking of putting a bookshelf in there, for now. But the light it's really good. It was an offering. An open door. Not a demand to walk through it, but an invitation to know it was there. Good light is important, I agreed. For reading. For plants, she smiled, understanding the subtext. For now, that's enough. The seasons turned. Our garden bloomed in a riot of color that made Marigold shriek with delight. We harvested 3 small, perfect tomatoes and ate them on toast with a reverence usually reserved for sacred relics. I continued my talks at the rec center. Arthur, the vet, became a steadfast friend. We never spoke of war or loss. We spoke of chess moves and the best way to grow roses. It was a friendship built not on shared history, but on shared presence. One crisp autumn afternoon, I found a small envelope tucked into my mailbox. It was addressed in a familiar, elegant script I hadn't seen in months. Isabel Laurent. Inside was not a letter, but a single ticket to a concert, a solo piano recital. The performer was listed as Li Chun. The piece, Chopin's Nocturnes. Handwritten note on the bottom simply read, "He would be honored by your presence." I held the ticket for a long time. The thought of sitting in a concert hall and hearing Ilara again, sent a complex chord of emotions through me longing. Joy, fear, peace. In the end, I went. I dressed in my navy blazer and took a taxi to the small, elegant hall. I sat alone, surrounded by the soft murmur of the audience. When the lights dimmed and Mr. Chun walked on stage, he didn't bow to the audience first. He walked to the piano, placed his hand on its lid for a brief moment, and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. An acknowledgment. Then he played. And oh, how he played. He played with a technical mastery I could only ever have dreamed of, but also with a profound, deep love. He played Clara's Nocturne. He played it not with sadness, but with a beautiful, aching gratitude. He played the spaces between the notes perfectly. I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me. I didn't see an empty living room. I didn't feel the sting of betrayal. I saw Clara smiling. I felt the weight of Chloe's small hand in mine as she learned her scales. I heard Marigold's giggle. The music was no longer a ghost. It was a memory, fully felt and finally released. When the final note faded into a silence that held the entire audience in its thrall, I opened my eyes. Mr. Chun took his bows. His eyes scanned the audience, and for a fleeting second, seemed to find mine. He gave another small, knowing nod. I nodded back. A silent conversation between two men who loved the same soul, albeit in different ways. I slipped out before the applause ended. I didn't need to meet him. There was nothing left to say, not outside. The night air was cool and clean. I didn't call a taxi. I walked. The city lights blurred around me, not from tears, but from a feeling of immense, overwhelming wholeness. I had lost a piano. I had gained a daughter back. I had gained a granddaughter. I had found a community. I had made peace with the past and found a purpose in the present. I arrived home to my quiet apartment. The metronome was still. The digital keyboard was silent. On the kitchen table, next to Clara's picture, was a child's drawing Marigold had left behind. It showed 3 stick figures, a large one with gray hair, a medium one with yellow hair, and a small one with a scribble of brown curls. They were standing in a garden of gigantic, brilliantly colored flowers. Above them, the sun was shining. In wobbly letters at the top, she had written, "My family." I picked up the drawing and smiled. It wasn't a masterpiece. It was better. It was real. I had spent my life chasing grand performances, perfect interpretations, thundering finales. But the true music, I now understood, wasn't in the concert hall. It was in the quiet, steady rhythm of a life rebuilt. It was in the simple, persistent growth of a marigold. It was in the misspelled word of a child who knew, without a doubt, that she belonged. The music was finally and forever my own.